Hey friends, Eric here from Eric's Great Crusade, and I'm here with Lauren. She is one of the guides here at the Lincoln Tomb in Springfield, Illinois. And in front of us here is a one of 6 busts, and I'll let Lauren do all the talking from here on out. She's going to know every bit of history here. So thank you, Lauren, for joining me.
Absolutely. Welcome to the Lincoln Tomb. As you said, this is the first of 6 models or studies that Daniel Chester French completed before the carving of the Washington, D.C. Lincoln Monument. This one was completed in 1960. And you can get a very close look at some of that detail that you can't really see in the large version that's in Washington, D.C. If you're looking, you can see in his pose, he's actually about to stand up. His fist is clenched, and he's got a stern look on his face, like he's ready to confront someone. And when you go to the Washington, D.C. monument, you can't walk around the back and notice that the drape on the back of the chair is actually the United States flag. There are stars and stripes, and it was, we think, the artist's way of saying if you wanted to come and tear the stars and stripes from the flag, you had to go through Lincoln to do it.
Gotcha.
Because he was the defender of the flag and to keep the Union together. This main room that we're in, the entrance room, is called the Rotunda. And the ceiling is palladium leaf. It's the highest priced and highest valued element on the periodic table, even more than platinum. And this is the largest concentration of it in the world, is on this ceiling.
Any reason they picked that material? Any reason they picked that material?
At the time, they didn't know it was that rare. And so it actually was a cheaper material to use for the ceiling in leaf form. But then later, after the Art Deco era, the 1920s and everything, it was realized how rare it actually was. And so it started to climb in value. So if you find any jewelry that is made out of palladium or instead of platinum, which they did a lot in the 19-teens and 20s, it's probably way more valuable than a platinum ring or a piece of jewelry.
How about that?
There are also columns that go all the way around this room, the brown marble columns. That marble is from Utah.
So you were mentioning about the marble columns.
Yeah, there are 16 of these brown marble columns going around this room, denoting the 16th president. The bronze metal columns that go around in between, there are 36 of those with a star on the top symbolizing the 36 states that Lincoln oversaw as he was president. There's a lot of symbolism in the design of the tomb itself, in the structure. Even the grates of the air vents and the gates going back to the burial chamber are meant to resemble corn. Not just because we're from Illinois, but because Lincoln started the Department of Agriculture while he was president.
Okay.
So as we're exiting the rotunda, we're going to walk down this first hallway to circle around to the burial chamber. And throughout the building, there is marble from 5 different U.S. states and 4 different countries. We have represented in the states Minnesota, Massachusetts, Missouri, Utah, and Arkansas. And then the countries are Italy, France, Belgium, and Spain.
Really?
So in these corners, we have Minnesota marble that surrounds all of the statues, Missouri for the bases of the statues, and in each corner there are also 12 stars that go around. That's because in 1930 and 31, when they redid the interiors of the tomb and added all the statues in marble, there were 48 states under the country at the time. So there are 12 in each corner, adding up to 48.
Okay.
Most of these statues that you see throughout, they are models or smaller versions of larger statues that exist in different cities throughout the country. This one, Lincoln the Soldier, is in Dixon, Illinois.
Was he actually in the army?
He was. He was a soldier during the Black Hawk Wars.
Okay. And the Blackhawk Wars for my friends overseas were the indigenous Indians.
Yeah,
First-
and it was a pretty tough time
Yeah, that's
in
what I heard.
Illinois. During that time, we were the western frontier, so it was a lot of interaction with Native American tribes at that time, and he joined the military to help out during those conflicts. Now this one is one of the examples that this is the only version of the statue, Lincoln the Ranger, also depicting him during his military service. All of the statues that are in the corners depict him in different roles that he played throughout his career.
For a second there, I thought it was Teddy Roosevelt.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really did. I won't come back and take some closer up pictures of this
Oh, sure.
later on. Thank you.
Yeah. And here we walk through the hallway. The travertine tiles are from Italy, and then the rose and veined marble is from Belgium and Spain in the hallways.
Why were those four countries, France, Spain, Belgium, and what was the last one?
France.
Yeah, France.
France, Italy, Belgium, and
Oh,
Spain.
Italy. Why were those four countries, why was their marble selected? And
I think it was mostly the designer of the interiors of the tomb just wanted those specific color schemes, and that's the countries that those particular marbles were prominent from.
Gotcha.
So before the 1930s, this was not opened at all, the hallways or the burial chamber. The only room that you could actually enter was the rotunda. And you would have to actually walk around the outside of the building and look through a gate in order to pay your respects to Lincoln, who was
I
in there in a marble sarcophagus.
I see.
But on days like Lincoln's birthday, which is in February, and the weather can get really bad
Yeah.
during that time in this area, there would be 2,000 or 3,000 people in a line outside to pay their respects. And it was pretty inhospitable of us, so the state government at the time raised the funds in order to redecorate the inside and open up the hallways and make it so you can actually come inside and have a quiet and more climate-friendly place to pay your respects.
Now this one here, obviously depicting Senator Lincoln.
Yes, this is when he was a lawmaker, right about the time that he's running for president.
Okay.
So he's an attorney. He's just running for president and engaging in the Lincoln-Douglas debates throughout the country and trying to get people on his side in that slavery debate of ending the practice here in the United States.
And this one here.
This is him as a circuit rider. While he was an attorney, he would ride to all counties in the state and practice law. And sometimes they were just civil cases over $20. Sometimes they were murder cases or major corporate cases. He practiced all kinds of law. But you'd often see him on a horse just like this with a shawl, sometimes even reading a book as he rides
Okay.
from county to county in order to represent those folks.
Okay, so thank you so much. We just had a nice conversation with one of the other docent volunteers here. Okay, so what is this plaque?
This plaque is an excerpt from Lincoln's farewell address when he left Springfield after he was elected president. He delivered it at the 10th Street Depot here in Springfield. There was a large crowd gathered around wishing him well, and he and the family got on the train and left for DC at that time on February 11th, 1861. But he always thought of this as his home, even though he was born in Kentucky and lived for several years in Indiana. Illinois, and specifically Springfield, is what he and his wife thought of as home. This is where they bought their first house, and all of their children were born here. So he wanted to express that to all of his supporters and his neighbors.
After you.
As we walk into the burial chamber, these gates are meant to resemble corn stalks with the plumes on the top and then the leaves going all the way down. And this is where most of the immediate family is laid to rest. Here we have an Arkansas red fossil with Lincoln's name on it. He is 10 feet below this stone. Originally, when the tomb was open to the public up until 1901, he would be perpendicular to this stone in a large white marble sarcophagus. And as I was saying earlier, he'd be ground level, and you would just look through this gate where you see a stained glass window behind and just pay your respects and then walk on to your next destination. But now we've enclosed it, and in 1901, when they reconstructed the tomb, it had to be completely rebuilt that year due to the foundations crumbling. They dismantled the tomb, and Robert, his oldest son that was still alive, requested that he be placed below ground so he'd be more secure. There was an attempted break-in back in 1876 that had a lot of people worried for many years that it would happen again. So luckily, because they were doing all that construction, the state said that's no problem, and at that point they dug a 10-foot deep pit and placed a steel vault at the bottom, placed his casket inside after checking to make sure he was still in there, and then they backfilled the entire thing with concrete.
What was the theft? What were they trying to steal?
In 1876, there was a group of counterfeiters out of Chicago that wanted to kidnap his remains and hold his body for ransom so they could use that money to bail out one of their counterfeiting cohorts that was in Joliet prison. So they came up with this scheme to come down to Springfield and break in that back gate, steal his body. Unbeknownst to them, there was already a Secret Service agent that was undercover in their midst, and he knew all about the scheme. His name was Agent Swagles, and whenever they got down to Springfield and began going in that back gate, Swagles said, "I'll go around and get the truck," and which was like a carriage, and all he did was walk around to the front door where the rotunda is and knocked on the door because that room was full of law enforcement. So they were already waiting. So he knocked on the door, all the law enforcement came out. They exchanged fire, and those other two men did escape through the woods behind the cemetery, but they arrested them very shortly after and put them in Joliet with their friend. So it was not very well thought out on their part. But yeah, that was the one attempt to break in, and all they did was get in this room. They didn't actually get into his casket.
I see.
Because also, unbeknownst to them, it was lead lined, so it weighed quite a bit, and they couldn't get into it.
Now, the different flags that are surrounding the tomb.
Yeah.
So I noticed the Virginia one in the back. I'm not sure what some of the other ones are.
Yeah, there's Massachusetts, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Virginia. And those represent the 4 states that Lincoln's ancestors settled in when they first came to America from Europe.
Okay.
Then, of course, we have the American flag in the center. The next 3 flags are Kentucky, Indiana, and Illinois, which are the 3 states that Lincoln called home and lived in. And then this final one is a presidential flag. And the only way to get one of those is through the White House itself.
Gotcha.
This one, particular presidential flag, was given to us during the Reagan administration. They gifted one to us to be on display.
Very interesting.
Now, the charcoal marble that you see in here in the columns and where the laurel wreaths are, that's all marble from France. And in the center is the quote, "Now he belongs to the ages." That was one of his secretaries, Edward Stanton, said that when he drew his last breath after he was assassinated. There's some scholars that say he actually said, "Now he belongs to the angels." And but this is the quote that was written down. So there's some ideas of different things that he might have said, but either way, he was correct. Over on this side is where his wife, Mary Todd Lincoln, Eddie, Willie, and Tad are all laid to rest in crypts behind this wall.
What did Eddie died of? Because he was only 4.
Eddie had pleurisy or dropsy of the chest, lung disease.
Okay.
Willie passed away in the White House when Lincoln was president of typhoid. He and Tad liked to play in the Potomac River behind the White House, and during that time, Civil War soldiers used it to bathe and as a bathroom. So they both got very, very ill, and Tad recovered, but Willie did not.
I see.
Then Tad passed away at only 17 from tuberculosis.
Now, how did he get tuberculosis? He wasn't smoking, or?
No, it was contagious back then.
Okay.
So there was a pretty bad epidemic that would go through, and he was one of them that contracted it and
Interesting.
became sick.
How about that? So
And it's so large. There is room for other generations of Lincolns. It was meant to house all future generations, but unfortunately, there just weren't very many. The only child that lived to adulthood was Robert, and he had 3 children. Of those 3, only 1 had children, and none of those offspring had
So
kids.
where is Robert buried at?
He's at Arlington National Cemetery.
okay.
We do have a stone for him just commemorating him, but he and his wife, Mary Harlan Lincoln, and their son, Abraham Lincoln II, or Jack, they are all buried at Arlington Cemetery. And we think Robert did want to be buried here. That would have been his wish, to be with his family. But Mary, his wife, wanted him buried at Arlington so his own accomplishments wouldn't be overshadowed by that of his father. Because he was a soldier during the Civil War as well, as a personal aide to Ulysses S. Grant. He was also Secretary of War under a president, and was the U.S. ambassador to the United Kingdom under several presidents
Well, I didn't know
in
that.
his older age. So,
Interesting.
yeah, he did quite a bit.
Looks like there was a little bit of
Correction.
correction, which is right.
He was born in 1943.
Okay.
Originally, it was 44, and we think that was a mistake on the stonecutter's part. He died only a couple of days before he turned 82, but whenever he passed, all of the announcements said he was 82 years old.
Okay.
So we think he just miscalculated the math wrong. But whenever we opened, again, after redoing the interiors with all the marble and everything, like the third group that walked through was a group of Boy Scouts, and they noticed that it was the wrong year. So being run by the state of Illinois, it was much cheaper just to fill it in and recarve it than it was to replace that entire stone.
I understand.
But it's a good conversation starter in the building.
Well, of course, I know this. Gettysburg Address. I actually refer to it in my programs for the French Legion of Honor.
Oh, yeah.
And I talk about the last full measure. And always at the beginning of those programs, I have a moment of silence citing that quote from President Lincoln.
Oh,
So,
that's great.
so we'll come back and take some
Very
pictures.
important speech.
Absolutely. And I think it was only, 98 words or something like that? I can't remember.
A short speech, but very powerful.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Sometimes you don't need to say a lot to mean a lot.
And that was kind of his genius. He was very good at getting his point across without having to drone on and bore people.
Yeah,
He could
exactly.
keep them engaged.
Yeah. So this bust here is for his time in the presidency.
It is, yeah.
Okay.
And the larger version is in Hodgenville, Kentucky, which is the town he was born in. This one has a really interesting effect with the light because the statue, he's seated, but if you look at the shadow behind the statue that the light cast on it, it looks like he's standing.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, I see that.
And we like to say it's, even though he's seated in this statue, he's still standing up for the rights of others.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And then this part.
And this is him during those debates, during the Lincoln-Douglas debates.
Okay.
This one's called Lincoln the Debater. And back before he ran for president, he actually was beardless. So whenever you see him with a beard, that's right before he was running for president.
Gotcha. How many days following the ended the Civil War. I think it was only maybe 4 or 5 a week that he was assassinated. Correct?
Yeah, not very long. Just I think maybe a week or two. Yeah, and his last inaugural address is also featured up here by the rotunda. But very unfortunate. He purposefully, when he ran for re-election, chose a Southerner to be his running mate because he wanted to ardently work on the reconstruction of the South and mend all of those broken bonds, but unfortunately he wasn't able to do that.
Yeah, and of course President Johnson was impeached, and all the plans were, really took decades, rather than years.
Right.
Yeah, I think we would have a completely different country if Lincoln had not been killed.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And, we're lucky that we did have him when we did. I don't know that any other man could have kept our country together. He was just the right person at the right time. This is another statue done by Daniel Chester French. This is also an original. There's no larger version. And this one is in Lincoln, Nebraska. There are many Lincolns throughout the country, and they are all named after this Lincoln.
And of course, this one as an attorney at the bar.
Yeah, as an attorney. So this is depicting him fighting for one of those court cases, leaning on a dais. And the original, larger statue is just outside of the University of Illinois campus in Champaign-Urbana. I think it's by the law sections of that college.
Well, we just hit the right time. There's been hardly anyone in here, and I want to just thank you.
Oh, absolutely.
Do you have a few minutes to describe what's outside to me?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
This is the second inaugural speech that I was speaking of, and this one was given March 4th, 1865. So just a little over a month later, he would be assassinated.
And of course, the war wasn't over yet.
Right.
Okay.
But you can even see in his second inaugural speech how hopeful he was for how they were going to rebuild and mend.
And we'll take a walk outside here. And if that's okay with you.
Absolutely.
All right, we're going to stop this one.